Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor, and today, as you can see, I have a special guest with me. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hey, this is TPAW otherwise known as TPAW on Twitter. And you know me in various versions of me, depending on what platform you look at and what thing you watch. But we're here to talk with Jonathan Taylor and have some fun.
Okay, nice to know you have a lot of, a lot of energy here. Now, before we delve into anything more specific, is there anything you don't want to talk about in this interview? Is there any topic that you do not want mentioned?
I mean, in all reality, I could talk about just about anything. You know, things that can offend anybody, and you don't want to ever get locked into that headspace of like, oh, am I going to offend somebody? Chances are you're going to breathe air and someone's going to get offended. So, uh, whatever you're comfortable talking about, I'll let you know if I run into a boundary that I don't want to cross. But otherwise, I'm pretty open.
Okay, good to know. Now that we've gotten the intro questions out of the way, it's time we delve into the questions proper. I've I've been for your Twitter before, after we agreed to do this interview, and I noticed that you have that you had a book that came out recently. So I have to know, is this your first full length novel?
Actually, no. I actually wrote a book a couple years back, published it, called Crimson Nightfall, and it was decently received by friends and family. Hard to reach anybody when you're an unknown author or a not a household name. But Crimson Nightfall is a dark fantasy story that actually takes place after Snake and the Dame, and Snake and the Dame takes place before then. So what I did was kind of went back to basics approach, went back in time because a couple different reviews I got were that I kind of throw people in the middle of the action a little too much, and there are some parts of the elements of the story that could have been fleshed out a bit more. So what I did was I went back to bare bones basics and went back in time so I could kind of do a softcore reboot, if you will. And so that story actually takes place after, and it was something that I came up with a couple years back. So Snake and the Dame, I originally released last year in July. We also had a kid and moving and a bunch of real life stuff that kind of got in the way. Not the child. Child didn't get away. Child comes first. But July of last year was when I originally released it, and I spent like a lot of months this last year just pounding away the gravel, making sure that I revise it because I'm not reactionary, but I do listen to feedback, and especially when like I want to make sure product and I want to make sure vision is in line with itself, like kind of Kevin Feige it up, if you will, Marvel terms. And so Crimson Nightfall is definitely something that I enjoyed working on. I had a lot of fun on it, and that's why I'm revisiting it. And I'm going to re-release it sometime later as like an entire volume of books. So like every one of my stories are like now more shorter, not small scale. Like I don't go small scale. Like the budget is like expensive as fuck if you were to make it a giant major production, you'd have to throw a bunch of money at this thing. So I don't know if it's ever going to get adapted, but if it does, hopefully there's a budget. But yeah, that's what that is.
Okay. Now, uh, was your first full length novel also the first thing you wrote that is also published?
Yes, technically. I explored a short or poetry anthology book a little later called Hope and Desolation: Moments in Time. Had the wife do a bunch of art for it. She's an artist, goes under Gestel Arts. But yeah, I have her do a lot of the art, and I've had her do a lot of and it's not because of any weird reason where it's like, oh, you're only doing it because your wife's, doing it. It's like, no, it's because she's good at what she's doing, and figure to utilize her talents, and everything like that. So she deals with a lot of mental health stuff, and so it's a way of pushing her out of that vacuum, that void. And but yeah, so she does art for the stories, and I will stay up endless nights writing, like any other average writer who's poor.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What inspires you? What what inspired you
What
to
inspires me
yeah.
to write the stories or just in general?
Well, right now well, let's talk stories. I think I have other questions about other topics.
Okay. So in general, I would say just about anything can inspire me. Like whether it's going to the store, whether it's reading something on the internet, whether it's watching some movie or an episode of a TV show or reading a book or listening to a book, any element in there, I'll also revisit the well, the well of creativity that is known as your past inspirations, past influences from childhood, teenhood, different areas of your life, and I'll kind of see random things that just stick out to me, and I'll like go, wait, I want to tell that story. Like I want to tell the story they didn't tell. And often it's stuff that didn't get covered. And I go, what if we did this? And so Snake of the Day, for instance, is a revisiting of Nightmare on Elm Street without it being Nightmare on Elm Street, because I'd have to kill my cast if I were to make a Nightmare on Elm Street. And then at the end say, oh, they're all still alive, by the way. It was all a joke or a dream. So what I did was I took and interjected different parts of influence from childhood. Like there's some Star Wars influence in there. There's some, underworld influence. There's Cirque du Freak influence. Darren Chan tapping back at you. There's like different influences everywhere in that story, and it's probably going to be that way for all the things I write. My mom was always telling me growing up, she's just like, "You're going to be the next Stephen King," and I'm like, "I don't know about that, Mom. How about you manage your expectations?" But I definitely do aspire to be kind of like that guy. In fact, I watched videos of him years ago. He's a snarky, sarcastic guy, and I was like, "That's gonna be me when I'm 70 or 60." Just so you know. So,
I think everyone
there you
tends
are.
to I think everyone becomes a little bit more sarcastic when they reach that age. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, like in mid 30s now, I'm just like going, and now everything is interesting to me, but like it's not as shiny or cutesy as it used to be when you're in your 20s because you have all this energy and you're like, let's go do this thing. And now it's like stress and bills and real life stuff, and you're like, God, I just want to be like a zany teenager or zany young adult, but you got to be an adult sometimes.
Yeah. Um, Now you already mentioned that Snake and the Dame is a quasi rewrite of Nightmare on Elm Street. Is that where you got the inspo for for the characters, or do they get or are they based on you know other other archetypes or
They
whatever?
are. So the characters in the story, glad you asked that. So I try not to go too far into dipping into the influence there. Like it's not necessarily a rewrite of Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's a treading. Like it's a playing off the idea that you have this monster bad guy who has ghost children minions, but they talk now. Like they're not just singing a song. They talk now and they have their own stories. And so we learn later on that they are past heroes who try to overthrow him or thwart him because he's still, a demon monster guy. And Braxton is actually one of my favorite villain characters to write for because he's just so chaotic, like chaotic neutral. But like, I didn't like make him an exact copy of Freddy Krueger. Like he has his own things going for him. In fact, one of the most interesting things is that much like some of the corrupted leadership figures or the corrupted villain figures in the story, which often see themselves as the hero, he sees himself as the hero, and he also sees himself as trying to heal the world, even though he's totally doing harmful things. And it's playing on the idea that even though we always see somebody as a monster, there's always somebody worse out there that's more of a monster, and it's all shaded in gray. So it's not perfect good and evil. Like I didn't want to like go into I balanced the tones of like Game of Thrones where it's all gray and it's all a balance of power and struggle and tyranny versus freedom. And like you got Daenerys Targaryen who is about, freeing herself from being a slave when she was a child to and also with the fact that she has this ancestral lore that's like heavy, and so she's supposed to be like the Mad Queen or the breaker of chains, that sort of thing. So I play with the idea of like using names or titles, or I play with like mythological stuff. I write gods and monsters essentially. And I see Abraxan as being this playful, chaotic monster who doesn't see himself as such. He sees himself as this very regal, very almost like angelic figure, celestial in nature, and it's playing with the idea of gods and monsters in the sense that he sees himself as a god, much like some of the other characters in there. So it's not exactly a rewriting of Nightmare on Elm Street. It's more playing with the nods of it and playing with like some of the structure while not copying it. And so it's like you got to be careful to balance that because you don't want to be confused of plagiarism, but you also don't want to be like a little too heavy on it. You want to be able to be like just lightly in the middle.
Okay. I almost want to say that it's Nightmare on Elm Street, but if Freddy Krueger were Loki, but that's not that might not actually be entirely correct.
That is interesting. That's an interesting take. Like if one day someone comes up to me and goes, "Hey, by the way, like you made him very much like Loki," I'll be like, "Interesting." Like I don't disagree with people's takes at all either. Because like if you have a take and you like watch a movie, for instance, and you like have a completely different opinion than the rest of people in the room, that's the beauty of storytelling. That's the beauty of and nature of film, art, and medium of the medium, because you can see anything in there. Like you could see stuff that like the storyteller never intended, and they're like, "Wait, what? You got that out of it?" And so, if someone sees a balance of Loki and Freddy Krueger, that'd be amazing actually, because then like you're seeing a balance of like Tom Holland and Robert England.
Tom Hiddleston. Tom Hiddleston plays Loki. Tom Holland plays Spider Man.
That's right, Tom Hiddleston. Sorry, I got the Toms wrong.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. Are there any deleted scenes in any one of your books? Is there anything you
Oh,
wanted to include
plenty.
but didn't? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, there are plenty. Like there's scenes that I wrote with hellhounds just hanging out together because it was kind of like when you have multiple dogs in your house or you have multiple, companions and like you're imagining them all talking to each other as mythical creatures. And so I kind of had like scenes like that, and then I had other scenes where like let's say I went too dark or too heavy with an action beat, or I undercut the drama with comedy, but yet I really like the jokes and the lines. I'll likely either delete those or just simply lift them from that part and then just reweave them into the story in a different scene. Because oftentimes you'll find that, like, let's say it doesn't work here, it'll look better in that section instead. And so I always try to reuse material, but I don't like slave to it. I don't like try to stay too strict to what I had before. I always try to reweave it or rework it because there's always a way that you can do it in some way. Like whether or not you doesn't make sense now and you're like, oh, that would never work. Well, then later on, when you're writing a different part of the story or you've come up with an entirely different chapter or story, like a novel, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what if I did this? And then you're like, wait, I already did that. And you're like, okay, let me go ahead and reweave that or re-edit that into that particular piece, and then suddenly it's working. So.
Okay. Um, this next question is basically the opposite of that. Namely, is there any scene that you initially were opposed to including, but then thought, uh, wait, this actually works here. I'd better put that in there.
Yeah, actually, there was actually quite a few parts of Snake in the Game actually where I almost didn't put any royalty scenes or different court scenes because the whole idea was that Peter's running away from responsibility, right? Like he's going out and hunting monsters, and while that can be seen as responsible, in the eyes of his father, it's seen as reckless and endangering, especially since he's a prince. And so, he's playing with the idea of freedom versus responsibility, and like great power comes great responsibility, like playing off the Peter Parker nod a little bit there. And it was just a big inspiration for his character. But it's I the idea of power and corruption, and like when you get a lot of power, does it corrupt you? When you have chaos versus order, like those are some themes that are in there. And there were some things that I didn't almost didn't put in there where I was like, I don't want to touch that right now. Like I don't want to go a little too deep into it. But then I was recommended that, probably a good idea to put in there because then it parallels the life of him going out and hunting things, borrowing from Supernatural a little bit, going out and hunting these monsters versus having to adhere to his responsibilities as a prince. And it actually juxtapositions the themes of responsibility and heroism and monsters. So it actually kind of did like a nice little interplay there. and it kind of plays an undercurrent. So some of the stuff you won't notice on your first read, some of the stuff have to revisit it and be like, wait, I just noticed that, and I noticed that too. And it's little nuggets or flavors, that I put in there that hopefully one day someone will find out.
Okay. And now we have another pair of contrasting question. Namely, is there any aspect of writing that you dread when it comes up? So when you're writing and realize you have to include a particular element and go, oh fuck, not this again. Do you have anything like that?
Um, yeah, I have some of the stuff that I have had to really be careful in treading on because some of the stuff deals with assault and some of the stuff deals with sexual assault. So like, SA. And I have to be very careful about how I tread on that because a couple of the story ideas I had before was visiting elements of trauma because at the bottom of the story is trauma. It's people dealing with dark situations in their life and then being shown that they can overcome it, that they can be pushed against the wall and still pull out on top. And my wife, for instance, has a lot of bad experiences from her childhood that I wanted to explore, and I wanted to kind of like not necessarily deep dive explore, but touch on so that like it lets people know they're not alone. But when I wrote Crimson Nightfall originally, there was a lot of heavy stuff in there that had to do with that, the essay, and I had to be careful because I didn't get so great reactions to it. And I was like, okay, so be more careful about that. Maybe I'm just, foolish and thinking I'm being bold or something. And so I went ahead and that's part of why it's being re-released as well, so I can Dark Knight it, if you will. Like I can make it more PG-13 in those areas and just kind of like pull in but pull out. Like so, like you'll have plenty of gore stuff, you'll have blood stuff because it's part of the horror genre, and there's the spaghettios, the fun spaghettios. But then there's the more jarring and visceral, uh, emotional reaction to the darker stuff that's more human, that's less fantasy, less fantastical that I have to like make careful and be more Dark Knight with. That's what I call it, Dark Knighting. And so basically, that stuff is the stuff that I, creatively speaking, if we're talking about not the process but like the content, that stuff that I like go, I clench the cheeks and go, should I just bother with it at all? Because if it's making me feel that way, but I know that it has to be tackled. I know that it absolutely has to be tackled, and it has to be touched on because if we go in our life and we curate the media because a lot of social media is curated to our needs, it's you create the world that you're in, like you choose to block people, you choose to mute people or mute content or block content, and it can dangerously have the bubble effect where you're putting yourself in a cardboard box or a bubble wrap package and then shipping yourself all around the world in a digital sense. And we don't want to do that to a point where we're in the real world and we run into it anyway and we're not prepared for it. And so some of the things I like to do as a writer is a cautionary tale. Like I'll visit cautionary tales and be like, don't want to go too deeply into this, but don't want to like go over the to the top because you can risk either alienating an audience or you can risk making yourself uncomfortable. And so you have to avoid uh, triggers that might send you over the deep end, but you also have to ease yourself into it. And so all of my work will probably have a trigger warning on it because there's going to be parts that I don't even know is triggering to someone. Like I said before at the beginning of this, is you can be offensive and not intended. But it'll be there. The trigger warning will be there so that if you know what you're getting into, you at least were prepared. And so that's something that I get like I get kind of like, like, do we really want to go there? And then I go, oh, yes, we do. And so it all depends on what it is,
Okay.
as long as you're having fun.
Yeah. To the extent to which it is possible with topics like that. The next
It's
question.
hard if he can do it. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Is there anything that makes you uh, rejoice when you encounter it? So you notice when writing that a particular topic or a particular kind of thing comes up, and you're like, "Oh yes, finally, again." Do you have anything like that?
You mean like
Something, something you,
topics of
something you
how?
enjoy writing.
Oh, okay. Sorry, the question made me overthink for a second. I was like, wait, T-pop, respond. Come on with the thought. Yeah. So as far as that goes, I love reaching topics that have to do with heroism, the human heart. So like the struggle of the human heart. Like like oftentimes we overthink and we'll think that we're coming up with a good story, and then we realize that we skimmed over top of the important bits, which happen to do with the human heart, the struggle of friendship, the struggle of love, of is it more scary to tackle on a bad guy than it is your best friend? Like you don't want to lose your best friend, but let's say that they're doing something that you don't like, or they're doing something that and how do you handle that? Like how do you handle that, tackle that? That was, I honestly think it was captured beautifully in the first Harry Potter book. I actually had to reference it recently because of a talk that I was doing with a buddy, and they were having a struggle with their friends, and they weren't sure how to tackle it, and they just at first they wanted to just run away from it, and avoid it altogether. And one of the things that I thought was really awesome in that first book was the part where Neville stands up to Harry, and then like Dumbledore literally awards it points in the very end, the climax, very last part of the climax, which is the denouement. And he goes, and for 10 points for standing up, it's important to stand up to your enemies, but it's even more important to stand up to your friends. And I find that's the important part of storytelling for me. It's visiting qualities of family, qualities of friendship, and then the struggle that comes with it. Because one thing you'll find in my work is that I draw a lot from family. Like I put a lot of family in there, and it's the idea that like even if you don't have a family, you likely chose one, and so there's struggles that come with that. There's the battle of the human heart, and that's something that I enjoy writing about a lot. Is visiting the balance of monsters versus humanity.
Okay, that's an excellent answer. Okay,
Thank you.
next up, well, we've already mentioned Stephen King so far, so I have to ask: Did you did you ever intend to be traditionally published, or was the intent always to go indie?
I honestly had no idea. I knew I wanted to publish a novel, and I knew that I wanted to publish more than one. Because one thing I always get stuck with people in real life is they're like, oh, are you talking about your book again? Or are you doing this with your book? And they always reference it as one. Like it's never in their head that you're writing multiple or that you're doing more than one project. Usually in their head it's just one. And so Stephen King is just something I bring up because it's something my mom loved as a when I was a kid, and even as a young adult, like when we had our first kid, and she basically reconnected with us, because there was a giant story there. But basically, I like a lot of authors like Neil Gaiman, Darren Shan, even his alter ego Darren Dash, Rick Riordan. Like I have like a plethora well to draw from when it comes to influence. Even not just books either, filmmakers. Love Kevin Smith. I love Taika Waititi. There's quite a few different storytellers out there that I love, and fellow writers in the community. Paul Sisler, Cornelia Blackmore. There's quite a few that I really like. Diana Bishop. Different friends that you acquire over the years on Twitter or the spaces where you know, peers that you like looking at, because we'd like to put people on a pedestal as a society and as a culture, and I like to lift up my friends more than I like to lift up celebrities, and so I like the idea of visiting the well and letting the well be flexible and wide and expansive.
Okay. Next question. During the process of publication, I assume you went into it with certain expectations or certain opinions. Were any of them were any of them proven true or false?
Yes and no. So, everyone glorifies the publication process as being this giant, amazing thing because, again, the idea of pedestals and the idea of power and the idea of monetary gain and the glorification of it all. But really, the publishing process is grueling. Like it is not easy. Oftentimes, you'll run into situations where you're questioning everything in your life and you're questioning like why you even got into it in the first place. It's very different from having a job, which is safe and secure, knowing that you're getting a paycheck, knowing you're getting paid. Now, if you have a job that doesn't have that guarantee, apologize. But some people have that. where like they're journalists, for instance, and they literally can get shot on the job these days. And I've run into a few people that have that. But the publishing process is grueling. Like recently, I actually learned that publishing it is actually the least favorite part because once you get it out there, then you have it out there and you can't change it. You can't do anything with it. You're just like, okay, it's out there. Moving on. Let's go do laundry or something. And oh, let's try and at least celebrate it and everything. But no one will celebrate it as much as you do, as the person, the author. No one will celebrate it as much as you do. So, like, as much as you're wanting to have a party or wanting to, I personally, I try to find small things. Like, it's not any different than going and getting a award at like your like a work party, like they like give you a reward for high sales or whatever it is that you're accomplishing. Never water down the accomplishment ever. It's a big thing. I mean, you have to dedicate a lot of your life to it. Some people out there dedicate a few days and then they publish it, and then you can see the quality difference. Other people will spend years on it. My first book, I spent 14 years on it. No joke. And it was grueling and hard, but I learned that I was very much a novice, very inexperienced, and there are things that you learn from that. It's humbling, it's grounding, and you're when you if you get published early when you're like 18, 19, you're barely even an adult. You barely know what taxes are, bills are, and so you don't have a lot of life experience. You'll go around with giant sense of hubris and pride to be like, I am so experienced. I experienced trauma, and it's like, yeah, that was one thing. So when you're when you're an adult and everything, it's more sobering. And like when you hit publish or when you have someone publish you, that can be exciting for all of 5 seconds. And then like if your book doesn't sell very well, then they'll either never touch you again or they'll just keep hitting you up for saying, hey, it's not selling very well, blah blah blah. And then you suddenly got to find a work out a renegotiation of some form. But I feel like with the process, for me, the most fun part of Snake of the Dame, for instance, was the writing process. Like editing was fine. Like I enjoy editing. I actually enjoyed that sometimes more than writing because then you're like seeing it come together and you're seeing all the juices flowing and the gears connecting and everything. But in all reality, I actually enjoyed writing the book itself more than I did editing because when you have to do the technical editing, which is like the spelling and everything else, you're like having to use a different part of your brain and you're just like, oh God. But like when you're writing from whimsy, just pure whimsy and just following this bucket of gold everywhere you're going, and the bucket of gold isn't like a paycheck. It's literally just the beauty of the story, the synthetic tissue of its connection with your imagination. That's the fun part to me. The editing process is fine. It can be exciting, and then it can be a double side of the coin. One day you're like, oh, I'm having so much fun with editing. This is amazing. The other day, can we just stop already? And so you have two different sides of it. And so I would say publishing is not even my favorite part. That's the you got to the end of the line now, and now you got to get to the next thing, and someone's going to ask you the inevitable question of what's next, and you're going to be like, I just did it. So enjoy what you did, enjoy what you do, and enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it. Because oftentimes, unless you have a really great support system, you're literally going to be the only one enjoying it, and you're going to be the only one cheering yourself on. So you got to stay driven too. So
Okay. Next question: How has the reception of your books been so far? Did you oh, was it a teachable moment, well, or were you more uh,
you
or happy
often
with it?
learn from you often learn from failure more than success. So with success, you get this massive dopamine rush, and go, oh my God, I'm so amazing, and I do such amazing things, and I write awesome. Or you become a crippling mess of anxiety, and you go, I be better. And that's usually me. I try to remember to celebrate my successes, but often failure is one of the greatest teachers because if, like, let's say you're stalking Goodreads to look for the reviews of your book and haven't dropped yet, or you see quite a few reviews that are really awesome and glowing, which I've had before, or wherever you're looking, I would say that it's actually a Danish trap to look for reviews and look for reception because you can honestly like run into the idea that running the notion that you think you did an amazing job, and someone's like, "Hey, this is a piece of crap," and you're like, "Okay," and you just kind of like go, "Sorry," and you like, go, "I spent a lot of time on that, but I'm sorry I did something that made you mad." So that's one of the also the traps of being a writer and a creative is that we're often people pleasers because we are a product of trauma in childhood, and so we try to. There's always a good balance to have, and either you just ignore it all and you're like, I don't know what the world thinks at all, and this is great. I only know what I think. Or you could be like, oh, I know what the world thinks. It was moderately well received, or it was greatly received. So a lot of times I'll have like small doses of it at a time because I have massive anxiety. I may be extrovert on the outside, but I'm also an introvert. And so, uh, with that being said, I try to measure uh, I try to keep it grounded as far as like what I look at because otherwise I will like stalk it and be like, what did I say? Like, hopefully they love it. And oftentimes everyone flocks to Rotten Tomatoes for a movie, for instance. And so with a book, it's almost the same thing. You go to Goodreads and you're like, please love me. So it's gotta be careful with it because you don't want it to overtake anything. You don't want to be like having to take care of your newborn child and you're like, what is Goodreads saying? And so I often like, I'll check things like try to remember to check things at the end of the day, or let's say the week by week process, depending on what you're planning in real life. But it's always good to be measured about it
Okay.
and manage your expectations.
Now, you already mentioned that your mother said you're gonna be the next Stephen King. So I have to ask, and you already mentioned that your wife made art for your writing. Do you have any other close friends or acquaintances who know that you're a writer, and do they support you, or how do they react to that? First of all, who knows? Who else knows? Second of all, what do they think?
They actually think it's awesome. That I'm a writer. Just everyone gets caught up in their own life, right? Like they get caught up in the psychosis of reality and the cyclical cycle of life. And so oftentimes, I will not hear from a lot of people for a little bit because people are busy. And but then like after a while, they'll like pop in like some squirrel and be like, "Hey, I like this thing you did," or "Hey, it was really awesome that you're doing that," or "Hey, you're actually inspirational because you're going through it and you're doing the thing." Like I call doing the things. And yeah, no, I've actually gotten a lot of good feedback in all reality with when it comes to doing this thing, this writing thing, authoring projects, and really just pushing through it because it's a grind. Life's a grind, and you gotta keep going, keep on moving, keep getting up and moving. When I talked about being the next Stephen King, it's more of like a almost a satirical statement more than anything because I while I enjoy the majesty and the power of his name, at the same time, like you got to remember that they're still a person, and so I want to be able to be the next Teapot. Like that's where I want to be. Is I want to be the Teapot. I want to be the TPAW Wolfric, the next author that you want to follow, like and not just an Amazon author that you occasionally see on the advertised list or however you find your stories, however you find your content that you enjoy. I want to be the guy that you're dedicated to and that you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for his stuff because he's just got that unique quality to it. Like you don't want to be a copycat. You don't want to, because like some people say that Stephen King's too long-winded, and me, I'm definitely not. Like I was reading out, doing an audiobook on Snake of the Dame, and I was doing a chapter last night, and I was like reading out the sentences and stuff, and I messed up a lot, so I have to do a lot of re-recording. And because with audiobooks, it's very strict. It's not free flow like this, where you can say a word wrong or weird, and when you replay it back, you can either really cringe really loud or do what I do is laugh at it. And like go snatch tacos, just because you messed up. And there's that marker, you can now edit that out. But I like to joke around whenever I'm recording. And as you saw before this little interview, but with that being said, I don't know. I want to be the next me. I want to be the next teapot. I want to know what that's like. I want to learn what that is, and I'm still learning. So
Okay, another great answer. You're absolutely full of them. By the way.
thank you.
Okay, second to last question now. Of everything I have asked you so far, is there any question you would want me to answer?
Yeah. What brings you to interview us and people in general? Like, do you like just the stories we tell, or what do you plan on being? Like, are you a writer? Are you a writer yourself? You're someone that enjoys creating? Because that's something I like doing with people is creating together. Everyone's got a story to tell. You just got to listen.
Yeah. Well, I am actually a writer. I am currently going through the final stages of my second book, and this is going up on my YouTube channel that I've been keeping up for about 3 years, and yeah, I I primarily switched over to interviews because I'm a content whore. I'll freely admit that. Um,
Nice.
but also because I wanted to spice it up a bit, bring a bit more variety. So I don't just talk out of talk about my book before I run out of things to say before I start having to uh, mention spoilers. And also, I could provide like writing advice, but it becomes hard to find specific writing advice, as in things that only that only you could say, because there are tons of videos about I don't know how to write dialogue, or how to set the scene, or how various aspects of world building work, but not a lot about how not a lot about how political turmoil develops, or how revolutions occur, or how how sports should be written, or how games should be written. So that is something I'm always looking for, something that something that is unique to me, something that makes people take notice, something that makes people go, oh, it's that guy. Let's see what that guy has to say. So yeah,
Nice, nice.
that's basically my answer. I'm gonna have to
Yeah, no, awesome.
I'm gonna have to rephrase that question because of the questions I have asked of you. Is there any you want me
Okay.
to answer?
Yeah. What are some of the things that brings you to writing? Since you brought up the fact that you're a writer, I tend to flip things on people. I tend to, make it a conversation, not just a, question and answer type thing. So what is one of the things that you like doing with your writing, and what inspires you? What brings you to it? What like, it's the secret sauce that makes you go, I want to do this. I want to tackle this.
It's hard to say whether or not there has really been a secret sauce, because kind of ever since I was in the single digits, I knew that was something that interested me. I knew I had a lot of things going on up here, and I wanted some of that to come out. Thing is, I wasn't always in the best space where I could do that. First of all, I didn't really have the skills. Second of all, almost always had other preoccupations as well. It is really only about 4 years ago that I really had both the time and the uh, uh, place of mind where I could really go. Okay, this is an interesting idea that I can work upon. Looking back, I kind of wish I had a bit more guts and started like 10 years earlier or something like that. But really, I think I would have um, uh, run into a lot of issues that other you know young writers run into, and figure out that there is that I don't actually know how to connect with my audience, or how to um, bring up something in such a way that it is interesting to people who aren't me. So it so really, while I sometimes wish I started earlier, I'm I'm fine with having started when it is that I started, because I don't really think I would have been in the correct headspace to convey everything that I would have wanted to convey, um, as as well as as well as I did if I started earlier.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. Everyone starts in their own time, so it's always open. the sandbox of life is ever flowing, and so it's never too late for you to revisit something or to try to approach something again. I'm just glad that you brought up the fact that you're a writer because that means you're a fellow fellow peer of writer, and you're not just interviewing people. Like that's awesome. What's your writing about?
It's a uh, well, it's a fantasy series. The first book is um, urban fantasy action adventure. I also had coming of age to that, but really it's not. I don't think this book is the sole carrier of the coming of age title. To some extent, it could be applied to others as well, including the one I'm working on right now, which is the second. Um, but it is no longer urban fantasy. I kind of switched settings around in the second one. The first one was a little bit more sprawling, both in time and in place. This one takes place over most of it, like over half of it, takes place over a single night. So it's in a space of a few hours it that it goes through that it goes for a lot of places, and also that
It's like an urban fantasy Clerks.
um, again, not exactly urban fantasy because it doesn't really take place within a city. It takes place within a castle, and only within a castle.
Nice.
Yeah,
Like Castlevania.
maybe. Except no one's running around with a whip, and no one's eating
Hey,
Pablo's chicken.
hey, those things are great, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but still there are a whole bunch of uh, weirdos with strange abilities running around trying to hamper the heroes. So it's
And
not
and
exactly
and and
dissimilar.
naked blonde Jesus, as he called him in what episode of Castlevania?
I didn't
I don't know if you
actually.
ever saw the anime.
No, I didn't.
Aw,
But
that was a
but I
fun
am
show.
I am
That anime
familiar
should
with it.
visit it.
Yeah,
Definitely visit it. It's fun. It's a fun
yeah.
time.
And funnily enough, there is a one of my main characters is actually blonde, but he doesn't get naked in the book.
Just like runs around like there was actually a book I read by Darren Dash, the author I mentioned, and it's this book called I'm trying to remember the exact name, but it was a play on another movie title. But basically, the taxi driver, and he's trying to save, like he's basically trying to take care of this because he's had a job to drive her around town, and she ends up involved in the mafia business, and so he has to protect her. And during this plot, there was an entire action sequence where she's running around the facility that she got trapped and kidnapped in, and she's carrying guns and she's shooting all the gangster mob lords, and she's utterly just buck wild naked, just running around naked, shooting people and killing them. And I'm like, and the whole time I'm cheering. I'm like, yeah, kill them and stuff. And I'm like, and then like I had to sit back and be like, did she just run around that entire place naked? Yes, she did. So there's
Okay,
that.
awesome. Now, the final question: is there any link or platform you want to shout out before we close?
Yeah, I actually want to shout out Paul Sisler with the Vellum. He does really awesome shows there. Should definitely check it out. He does it's called In the Moment, and he's got like different segments, hour-long segments. One of them is with me. You got Diana Bishop, you got Shadow Fox, you've got various different people that are very gifted and talented in what they do, and they have a lot of good, awesome things to say. Shadow Fox likes to talk about spirituality. Diana likes to talk about spirituality as well, but she has like a different version of it. Me, I talk about writing with Paul. I've been breaking down the hero's journey and breaking down the things there. We talked about visiting reviewing again, like reviewing shows and movies and stuff, but we try to keep it relevant. And but yeah, that's the one thing I want to also shout out. And then I've got a few other different areas, but we'd have like an entire list of things to tackle if I were to do that. But also check out Cornelia Blackmore's space. She's got a podcast on YouTube you might enjoy. So there's a few things I can shout out.
Okay,
Also, Crazy Peas. Crazy Peas is a podcast I do.
okay. Well, what can I say? Thanks for all the recommendations, and uh, thanks for thanks for being with me today. Thanks for the patience that displayed while I was trying to sort out technical stuff. Because yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Like it's been fun, like talking about, writing and stuff. And I know I talked a lot about what I like doing with it, but it's been fun. I also got to ask, and the crowd got to know that you're a writer if they didn't already know that before. And they got to know a bit more about it. Could tell you're a little reserved on talking about it, or you're holding yourself back. But
Well, I'm
I
pretty sure
enjoyed hearing about it.
I'm pretty sure to some extent my own crowd already knows it because I talk about it on my YouTube channel quite a bit. I also talk about reading and reviewing
Cool.
books uh, quite in almost as much, if not actually the most. Also, my Twitter crowd where I spend most of my time is also aware of that. So you know
Awesome.
that's plenty of new
No,
people to seek out, and in case anyone is interested. But still,
yeah,
uh, but still,
yeah.
I'm
I
glad
appreciate you.
we can cross pollinate, so to speak.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you having this opportunity for me, and I appreciate you welcoming me into your space and talking to you, and asking me some questions about myself, and then I had to turn it on you and ask you questions about yourself, and got to learn some things about you. And very much thanks for having me, and I hope everyone had time this afternoon, or
Okay,
had fun this afternoon.
okay, and well, thank you to everyone for your attention. If you enjoyed what it is that you've seen, then please leave a like. Maybe even share this video wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you would like to add to to my questions, to my guests, to my format, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. Um, uh, I already mentioned that I have a book out. It's called Heir to the Empire Next Generation. You'll find it in a master link in the description down below, right past all of my social media links, which I also suggest you check out, should you choose to. If you do, you'll also find my Patreon because I because I also have one of those where you'll where you'll, where you can support me more directly and also receive some perks like early access to my videos and my scripts, both for this channel and for my second channel. Because yes, I also have a second channel. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.
Have a great evening.